Hello, YouTube. After I purchased this pistol a while back, I came to the realization that there's not a tremendous amount of information on YouTube about these since they are discontinued and they were from a time long ago. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 99. This is basically a takeaway from Walther's P99. It was actually a collaboration between Smith & Wesson and Walther. I believe, as the story goes, Walther lost their importer and Smith & Wesson teamed up with them and had them make the slide, and then they made the frames. And they did that so that they could decrease the cost for law enforcement agencies that ended up adopting, I believe, the 9 and the 40 when they came out in, I believe it's 2000. But now Walther obviously has an importer and they do their own thing. But at one point in time, they kind of did this collaboration where I believe Walther made the slide in the barrel and then Smith & Wesson made the frame. It could be reversed. Don't quote me on that. But I do know that Smith & Wesson made their own thing and then Walther made theirs and they put it all together. This is the 40 caliber version. It came with, and this is an original factory magazine, the law enforcement magazine. These actually had quite a bit of different issues between spring tension and where the follower kind of angles up. Sometimes you get a jammed up round, or sometimes the slide wouldn't lock back on the last round. This also had rust on it, so I've since put it aside. So when I initially bought this pistol, I was specifically looking for these magazines, and because these are no longer produced and, you know, they have collector value for being law enforcement only marked and things like that, they are very expensive and not very common. So I went on the internet and was trying to figure out, well, you know, how the fuck can I get a magazine for this guy? Did I make a mistake? And lo and behold, I should have known better. The Walther P99 magazines in 40 cal or 9 fit the Smith & Wesson in 9 or 40 cal. So these are the 12 round Walther P99 magazines, and they fit just fine. And they, hold the slide back and load just fine. Now that it's cocked, you'll notice that just like on the P99, you have this loaded chamber indicator. But what's neat, even though this is a striker fire gun, is you have a decocker on the slide. Canik has something similar to this, but the P99, I think, is one of the main ones that initially had it. I really like that just because now you can carry something in the chamber and you're back to a longer double action trigger. And so the double action trigger itself, kind of stiff, but smooth all the way through. The single action trigger is a little interesting. They call this the anti-stress trigger, and just kind of listen for the click real quick. So 0 take up, but a lot of mushy room, kind of like it's just kind of dangling there, and it gets you to this point. And at this point, we're now in the single action trigger, and then that's very crisp and smooth. Just like that. But it's that anti-stress trigger that's a little interesting. So there's nothing going on here, and then once you get it past that hump, then it's right to there, and then it locks it in place, and then you're into your single action. I thought that was kind of neat. When I first picked it up, I thought it would fuck with my accuracy and kind of fuck with how I would operate the pistol. So I was a little disappointed. I initially thought something was wrong in the trigger mechanism, but it's part of the design. So after I sourced my magazines, basically I was online and I had came across the fact that the Walther PPQ M1 magazines work in the P99s and Smith & Wesson 99s. And you'll notice that this has a little extension down here, so it takes you to 14 rounds, so it's marked 12. So it's the same exact mags as those, but with this base pad allows you to put in 13, 14 rounds. And this base pad, I was a little bit concerned that I was going to have some fitment issues here on the frame, and it just basically loads just fine. Slightly pushes it forward, but nothing that affects the function of it. Locks back just fine, feeds just fine. Overall, I'm happy I risked it, but I have so many of the 12 rounders that I really have no use for more of these. But I thought that was a cool addition, is that you could source these for your P90 or your Smith & Wesson 99 here. Next, when these are loaded to full capacity, they are brand new magazines. So I do know that, over time, the spring tension will probably go down a little bit. But when loaded to 12 rounds, when you insert these, that extra 12th round actually puts a ton of tension here on the mag release. And since this is a polymer part, one of the things I'm holding off on is loading these to capacity. In fact, I will possibly, with the slide back, load my 12 round magazine and then, send the slide home, and then from there basically have my 12 rounds, so 11 plus 1. And the only reason I again do that is just to not put a tremendous amount of pressure on this magazine release. Your mileage may vary, but that's something that I've tend to hold off on just because this is no longer produced. These are quite common at pawn shops, gun shows. There was a tremendous amount at one point in time of law enforcement trade-ins, and you'll notice this CDS grip cover here. Talon also makes one, I believe, but the CDS just looked a little bit nicer to me. A lot of these pistols will have a tremendous amount of holster wear, and so, from there, it kind of looks pretty shitty. I had the original owner had Cerakoted the slide, so it actually looks a lot better than what most of them do. And then obviously there were commercial ones that were available, but most of what people find are typically going to be those law enforcement trade-ins. Holsters do work for the Smith & Wesson 99 that would work for the P99. There's a slight difference, obviously, in the trigger guard and things like that, but if you get one and you're rocking a light, then it's going to bind on most of the light, and then you may have just a little bit of fitment in the back here. So I've had a holster where I just took a heat gun and kind of opened it up a teeny bit more so that this could fit in. But for the most part, if it's a light mounted, weapon mounted light holster, it's going to attach onto this. So you should be able to use that just fine. I'd say the accuracy on this is actually pretty phenomenal. So that's hence why I put a light on this. This is actually one of my home defense guns, just because it's pretty darn accurate. For being 40 cal, I thought it would be a lot snappier, but it's actually a pretty smooth shooting pistol and very accurate. Really, my only two complaints are the fact that, one, no longer produced, so spare parts and things like that are pretty difficult to find. You can find some here and there for like the trigger assembly, the slide, the barrel, and stuff like that, but like the magazine release. And then here's the next one. The second Achilles heel to the P99 and the Smith & Wesson 99 is this rear sight. And so this is adjustable. When you take this pin down, you can adjust the sight, and this is actually adjustable just by fingers once you take that pin out. But it's this pin right here that if this ever breaks or goes missing, you now have this sloppy sight. And theoretically you could dovetail in a brand new sight, but I'd rather have the entire operating system of the rear sight if at all possible. But that's one thing that I don't really enjoy about the pistol. I wish I had a supply to that. If I could buy like 3 or 4 of these little fuckers, that would be great. Plus the springs. Realistically, I could probably make one because it's basically just a slotted pin that goes in against this little square sight adjustment screw, and then a little spring in there. So you probably could replicate it if you had to, but realistically, it would just be nice to have something from a factory that I could utilize, and I've yet to find a supply for those, so that'll be something that I get into. But yeah, so these were initially brought to market in the 2000s. They also made that was the 9 and the 40 that came in the 2000s, and then they also made one in 45 ACP that came out, I believe, in 2003. And I haven't really seen the 9mm or the 45 versions out in the wild. I almost always see just the 40s, at least in my neck of the woods. And, to be honest, for $300 or less, this is a fantastic pistol, especially considering the fact that you can get a grip cover if it's really holster worn from CDS. It makes it look like it's brand new. And then if you re-Cerakote the slide and barrel, I mean, the thing looks brand spanking new. And again, this fulfills a kind of a, I would say a long desired acquirement, for a pistol that I fell in love with back when I was, very, very young and airsoft guns first came out. They had a Walther P99, and I just liked how the magazine's release with the little mag release here on the trigger guard. I thought that was really slick, and obviously it didn't have the decocker here, but it had like the little, molding of it, and, I just really liked that airsoft gun when I was a kid, and I always said that I would buy a P99 one day. But again, I can't really justify the price because, one, it's now being discontinued, but then two, you know, I found this thing for sub $300, and I mean, it was a wonderful purchase on my end. The accuracy proved to be fantastic. The only downside is again, part supply is few and far. And again, some stuff will swap, but since the frame itself differs from P99, there's only certain things you can and can't use, but I haven't been able to source a whole bunch of stuff. I think I found triggers. I think I found at one point in time the magazine release assembly, but that's the part I mostly want to get spare parts for. But a pretty good pistol. I would definitely pick one up if you happen to find one in the wild, and just know that the Walther P99 40 caliber mags work just fine, and then also the M1 variants of the PPQ also work in these as well. I believe these are just the same mags, just with a different base plate is really all that is. It's, you know, and then this one happens to be more of a matte finish, whereas those are blued looking. But yeah, pretty damn good pistol. And then, like I say, at best, what I would do is I would actually offload and sell your original factory magazine, since these really are pretty darn shitty. I had so many issues when I first took it out. I thought this was going to be a dud of a gun, just because of that magazine alone. So I'm happy I took a chance on the different magazines, and sure enough, it works. So if there's any questions you guys have, feel free to leave them in the comments. I don't check the channel often, but when I do, I'll try and get to them. Lastly, I realize I ramble, but until I get paid to custom tailor a video just for you, or you give me free shit, you can go ahead and keep your comments to yourself. All right, thank you for watching. Bye.